are still creeping in, but I think we can probably go ahead and start to kick things off, at least give some intros here. So, Ryan, you want to kick it off here?
For sure. So I am an account executive over at Dooley. We are a product-led growth company and we sell to revenue teams. I promise I won't flood all your inboxes after this if you do say you're a VP of sales, but we're going through the motions right now of our subject today, and it's been really cool to get to know folks like Tim and Breezy as the what we're going to discuss today is pretty relevant to what I'm doing on my day-to-day basis.
Cool. I can go next. I'm Tim, the CEO and co-founder of Correlated, and we basically help sales teams and individual AEs use product data to help inform who they reach out to, when they reach out to them, and the message to use. And a lot of the folks we're working with are working at product-led growth companies, so companies that have maybe a self-serve model where people can just start using it very seamlessly, frictionlessly to start, but then they also have a sales team that's responsible for figuring out which of those self-serve users are actually worth talking to. And so where we come in is to help cut through that noise and help sales teams figure it out. So we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that and some of the tactics that we see even without Correlated, and a lot of good stuff planned. So excited to talk to you all. Over to you, Breezy.
Awesome. So I'm Breezy. I run growth and marketing over at Correlated. So thanks everybody for jumping on here. People are putting in, your title or what you do in the chat. So feel free to keep adding that in there. Also, this will be an open discussion. So, we'll present and we'll have some slides to help guide the conversation. But if you have questions throughout, definitely jump in. You can either toss those in the chat, or you are welcome to jump on camera and ask it live. So from there, let's dive right in.
Sales expectations, KPIs, what are we asking them to do? Because I think some of it is because
we've got someone that might need to go on mute.
There we go. No worries. Done and done. All right, Ryan, you want to kick us off here?
Yes, yeah. So, despite what you actually believe, they don't go together. No, I'm just kidding. So, a lot of the misconception that may be out there is that sales and product-led growth don't necessarily go together. In fact, why would you need sales if you had something that was literally labeled as product-led growth? But in reality, some of the greatest, product-led growth companies out there have a really in sync, robust sales organization in motion on top of it. So in fact, 96% of product-led growth companies have sales teams. So there's a lot to unpack there. Even Slack, which you would think, maybe Zoom or, Snowflake, stuff like this. With that being said, this is a slippery slope, especially for sales reps, new VPs of sales, and founders. When we talk about product-led growth, you would think that the product is going to basically sell itself. And what we're going to really dig into today is how you can add a little bit of fuel to that fire. Because truly, I believe that with a good sales motion on top, you're going to be able to win faster deals and you're going to be able to increase the size. If you want to think about it in a certain way, that product-led growth is people come into your product. They're thirsty. They're looking for the quickest way to get a glass of water. Now, the sales team on the other side of that is going to be the person that digs in and says, what does your sodium intake look like? What is your diet? How frequently do you exercise? Have you been spending time in a sauna? Because much like voting, I think product-led growth users or end users are 1 to 2 issue buyers. I think I wrote a post on this a little bit back. But ultimately, they're focused on the things that are going to solve their immediate end user pain. And if it's self-service, they're going to make that quick purchase because it solves the pain. They see the value. But if that doesn't necessarily happen or necessarily get to the time to value quick enough, what a sales organization can do is really dig in and flesh out what that is. So we're looking for the business problem, not just the technical problem. So with founders completely focused on that time to value and end user journey, what we're noticing is that the sales team comes in and they end up focusing a lot on the product itself, the features, the benefits, little differentiators here and there. But what we want to do as salespeople is really understand why that pain impacts the broader organization. And then how do we take the actual product usage data from someone like Correlated and bake that into our sales process to point us in the right direction. So I don't know, Tim, Breezy, if you wanted to add any onto that as well.
Yeah, I think, at a high level, this sort of statistic is really telling where, the self-service flywheel is super important for some of the best and fastest growing companies out there in software, but it's not, on its own sufficient to really build a massive company. You ultimately do need, salespeople, and oftentimes those salespeople are responsible for translating some of the self-serve dynamics into who to sell to, and the strategy that they should take and the tactics they should employ, and all that. And it's super important to use all that information, and having an easy way to do that is important. So obviously that's what we help with. But if you're, I guess, not doing that, or if you're ill-equipped to do it, it can be, it can really hamstring you. And we're going to talk a little bit about it, I'd love to hear, from folks on the call, what they're doing today, that they're working or not working on this front. So we'll check in on that in a little bit.
Definitely. And even just to bring up a quote from, I don't know if any of you follow Blake Bartlett, but I wrote this down because he said it in a podcast and it really kind of stood out. He said, people aren't introduced to Slack because an SDR cold emailed a CIO. Imagine if the only way to actually get introduced to Slack or that company was through a gated book a demo button on their website. The growth that they would have accomplished would have been far lesser. And while I believe he is 100% spot on there, and that's undoubtedly true, all the largest product-led growth companies have really robust teams. So why, if the product is going to lead to that and make that intro and bring you to the time to value, would you need a sales organization, sales motion on top of that? That's what we're really going to try and peel back here.
Awesome. All right. Let's dive into one of the most newly hotly debated topics here. Is the MQL dead? What's this PQL everybody's talking about? How do these things stack rank? And especially coming from someone like myself, who's a marketer here, are we going to call the marketing qualified leads dead? So first of all, let's just dive into what is a PQL. So a PQL is a product qualified lead, and users can become a PQL multiple times. And some advanced companies did this for MQLs, but in most cases, you just see an MQL happen once. But PQLs can happen multiple times based on actions that people are taking in your product. And so there's also thinking about that. That's because there's multiple expansion opportunities in product-led growth companies. So first you start using the product, and then you get, more people from your company or from your team to start using the product with you. And then you try a new feature or dashboard and you upgrade in that way. So there's all these different opportunities for expansion, which is why there's going to be multiple definitions for a PQL. And some of the things to think about, like what's an MQL versus a PQL. So in the past, and I mean, still today, MQLs are basically actions that people are taking on your website, like downloading ebooks or visiting certain web pages, things like that, right? All the stuff that we normally look at, and then we pass it over to sales and say, okay, this is an MQL. Let's keep moving it through the process. PQL is like the same concept, except for it's the actions that people are taking inside of your product. And generally, when a product-led growth company first gets started, they might call everyone who signs up a PQL. Usually that definition gets swapped pretty quickly to instead be about the certain actions that people are taking inside of your product. But thinking about those two different definitions of like the MQL and the PQL, I don't think that the MQL is dead, because not every single person will get into your product. But I think if you have an MQL coming across the table, or a PQL, meaning someone who's been taking action inside your product and playing around with different features and dashboards and other things that you have, then obviously the qualification criteria there is much higher for those PQLs than for someone who'd maybe just downloaded an ebook or looked at certain things on your website. So I think, you know, if you had to choose and you're going to get one across the table, the PQL is definitely of higher value. But, you know, I'm curious what you two think, Ryan or Tim, if you want to dive in and what that looks like from the sales side, from your perspective.
So
I just asked, I'll let you go in a second, Ryan, but I just asked everyone to put a thumbs up if they use PQLs, if at your company you use PQLs today. That's something that's part of the sort of flow from marketing to sales in your process. If not, okay, great. I see Adam and kinda. Right. Go ahead, Ryan. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but then I definitely want to take questions or hear thoughts from folks that do have it as well.
for sure. I mean, well, I think Breezy, we mentioned earlier, there's moments that, you know, some of your client base is not going to be able to come in as a PQL. There's certain times where we have to go through security and IT approval before they actually get into the product. So then we're relying on the MQL, and the MQL is great, definitely gives us a point of direction to go into. This is going to go into the examples we give of kinds of emails you can use to plug in data and allude to the problem that you're actually trying to solve there. But what stands out on this slide to me is that there's multiple times someone can become a PQL. When I am doing my outreach, or I'm really trying to figure out why are they logged into the product. It's not like, hey, why did you download the white paper? I think, Tim, you said like, hey, they're doing research up front, but you don't know what part of that white paper they looked at and went, wow, that's awesome, and then spent more time on that. That's what the PQL is. The PQL, you can see where they're spending their time in the product, you know, how long, how often, how many other people. Is that like the virality moment in your product that you need to focus on when reaching out to them? So a lot of the time, I'll use that as an ongoing, you know, sequence where my first initial thing will be focused on if they spent time on pipeline editing within Dooley. I know I know where to dig. I know where to look. I know to look at their new hires, whether they're in the SMB market or most of their reps are coming in on mid market, because if I know the business problem that area of the product can solve, I can reverse engineer that data in my outreach, as well as when I'm going to a VP of sales and I'm like, hey, here's what your team is doing, here's where they're spending their focus. And typically when that happens, this is also present. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So hyper relevancy, instead of coming out just notice you downloaded this. I have more data to really make my mark and try to dig in on the right point as opposed to, you know, broad.
Maybe I can quickly open it up for discussion on PQLs for the people that gave a thumbs up, and from Max or Adam or even kinda Jake. Would love to hear just really quick thoughts on, you know, what you like versus don't like about PQLs today in your companies and in your businesses, and sort of if you want to share just a little bit more on how you do it, that'd be great.
I don't mind hopping in here, Tim, if you don't mind. So I think we have a freemium model. So there is a free plan which businesses come into, and so there's kind of two areas that we look at with PQLs. One is we run everything through Clearbit. So it's the kind of the demographic data of that customer, like how large is the business. We also have a number of sign-up questions, like why are they here, like where they can actually self-identify in terms of the type of organization they are. And so we use a combination of that with Clearbit right now to segment those customers and score them based on that, which even though they're coming in and setting up in the product, to me is almost somewhere a hybrid between an MQL and a PQL, because it's not actually based on the activity within the product, it's based on who they are and how they identify. What we're currently looking at for next year is what are the actual triggers which we can set up within our product. How do we identify which triggers are leading indicators, and then almost add the two together, which can get pretty complicated, I guess, is probably the challenge. It's like, how do you work out what the exact breakdown in terms of scoring is going to be and how to set that up. So that is definitely something. And we have a pretty high volume of accounts coming in, customers every week as well. We're probably in like the tens of thousands a month.
Wow. Yeah. And yeah, Adam, like, sort of what you're describing is how we help at Correlated. And essentially our kind of approach is to give sort of the companies and the sales teams we work with a testing platform. So like you can create those different triggers. That's a combination of firmographic or demographic data with product-based attainment, and then route them to sales and then see what happens down funnel, and then heavy up on the ones that are working versus not. And that's one of the strategies that we seem to find a lot of success with in the companies that we're working with at Correlated.
I'm actually curious, Adam. Currently, does the sales team utilize this data in their outreach, whether from the BD side or throughout the cycle to present that data, or is it more like once an engagement is made?
So the data in terms of the
That
type of customer. Yeah, so this is where we kind of, like I said at the beginning, we do use PQL as the term we use, but in my mind, it's not a true PQL. It is more, it's almost an MQL. Yes, they're setting up within the product, but we're not using their behavioral data within the product. We're using demographic data. So we will use that. So if they say, hey, I'm here to educate my customers, they will then go into a campaign where we're actually reaching out to them, trying to get them to engage based on that piece. If they're trying to educate their customers and they're 1,000+ company, then we're going to be talking to them about customer stories of similar businesses, and that will be part of the outreach. What we're not doing right now, and what we're going to begin doing, is going to be more based on, I don't know, if somebody uploads 10,000 students into the platform, we want to know about that instantly. And we want to be contacting them to say, hey, why did you do that? Let's talk. So yeah, so the answer, I guess, to your question is not yet, but soon.
And I think that that's actually pretty common across most companies that are, PLG, is that they almost treat the PQLs as MQLs. And yeah, I think there's a lot of room for expansion. I leverage it, but not as much as I would want to or need to. And I'm not necessarily sure yet what exact data I want to see that'll point me in the right direction as a rep, personally. Yeah.
One of the frustrations we hear from sales teams that have PQLs in is that the score itself doesn't tell you a lot. So like you might have, whatever 9 out of 10 or whatever it might be, or a 99 out of 100, whatever the sort of scoring mechanism that you're doing. And that might be, the result of your data science team and like a lot of work that, has gone into putting that score into place that might be quite directionally accurate. But at the end of the day, when a salesperson sorts through a list or starts to go down leads or accounts and they're seeing, okay, well, this is the top 10 based on the score, it's not really telling them like what to do and like why that's a good score necessarily. And I think that's one of the challenges again that we're trying to help with, selfishly Correlated, but that seems to be coming up over and over again, even with teams that have done the work to put in PQLs. So but all that's to say it is an improvement, especially for PLG companies, over just looking at pure kind of MQL or marketing touch points. Looking at product-based engagement is essential as well.
Yeah. And we'll give a few examples of like a sales motion or sales outreach utilizing whatever data you have at this point. So even if it's not fleshed out, fully triggered, like there's a couple things that you could probably still lean on, or the sales team could lean on right now, that could increase, net new bookings or just in general gauge of interest.
I just saw Max's comment, and yes, definitely. We're actually going to jump into some examples of exactly how to use that data.
I was mid typing about that. Thanks for that question, Max. It's a good one.
All right, let's move along into collecting some product usage data and like what that looks like what data does the sales team actually need to be able to do this, so that we can jump into some of those examples on how we can basically act on this data.
Thanks, Breezy. I appreciate it. So, I think one of the things that's maybe constrained the ability for a lot of companies to put sort of PQLs into practice and product data into the hands of sales teams is that it's actually quite complex to kind of get the data collected in the first place and then put it in the hands of sales teams. And again, that's an area where, we're really trying to help here at Correlated. But, essentially there's kind of three sort of phases, I would say, that exist today. First is the data collection. So you have to actually collect product data in your application. There are a couple of tools that help with that, like Segment or RudderStack. And then oftentimes a lot of the companies that we're working with will consolidate all of that data about what people are doing in the product alongside things like billing data in Stripe or Zuora or ChargeBee or support tickets or all your CRM information. I'll put that all into these central places called cloud data warehouses, Snowflake, Redshift, or BigQuery. And then finally, you're also collecting a lot of great data in CRM. And so things about deals like your activity, all that's kind of happening either combination of manually or somewhat automated. And then finally, there are these like relatively newer tools where they're called reverse ETL. It's a bit of a mouthful, but they're designed to sort of take what's in that cloud data warehouse. That's like this kind of hopefully useful repository of all your customer data, and then push it down into tools like Salesforce or HubSpot. We think that's a great first step, but ultimately there's a lot more you can do, and we'll tell you a little bit more about what that looks like in a second. The next two categories, we'll dive into the data intelligence piece in a second, but thanks, Breezy. So basically the next two categories are like intelligence and then action. And so I'll start with action and go back to intelligence. For the action side, that can be things for PLG companies like in-app guides or sort of the chat bots like Intercom or Drift. It's like AppQ's great in-app guide. Pendo's like has that too, onboarding guides. And then on the marketing side, sort of some of the more traditional marketing automation stack often are now being more informed by product data. So HubSpot and Marketo for sure. And then for sales, the stack that often exists in addition to something like a Salesforce or HubSpot, things like you might be using Slack for internal communications. You have some bots that are there maybe providing leads, that sort of thing. And then outreach and sales off, which Max brought up. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second for more of the sequences, especially for kind of the SDR or ADR type role. In the middle, the intelligence piece, that's where we feel there's like a big kind of missing link, where right now a lot of companies that are product led will try and arm their sales team with something like a Looker or Tableau or maybe Mode. There are a few different options, and essentially it's like dashboards related to what leads and accounts and contacts are doing. And so the data might be there. You can go in and say, hey, this lead is like there's some interesting data here that might suggest that they're ready to convert or expand or whatever it might be, but it still requires a sales team to proactively kind of go into those tools and be keeping track of them. They're not getting pushed that data out into like the tools they're using. They're not able to really easily take action off of that. And so I want to maybe pause here we hear that a lot, but does this sort of resonate with anyone here? Are you kind of armed with these BI tools, but it's like not really doing the job? Does that resonate at all? Or love to hear if anyone wants to chime in either in the chat or on video if they have thoughts on this particular piece.
Absolutely. I mean, that happens. First of all, it's been happening to me for, I don't know, 13 years, where even if we did have some sort of BI tool, it was usually something that wasn't made for our use case as a salesperson, A. B, it was like product or some other, pencil pusher using that thing. And then lastly, it wasn't strategically thought out, because again, back to my first point, this happened, Tim, we've known each other for a long time, and MoPub, right? MoPub, we were open source, download the SDK. We had tons of developers using us, and that was the model. It was ad tech, so a little different, but we had no clue. And then eventually we got meta markets, and then we had some stuff, but it was like we logged into meta markets and it gave us some things, and we had to figure out what we were going to do. That we were using something called MixRank. I don't know if you remember MixRank. Some other like kind of like Lead IQ type of thing, but for mobile apps. App Annie was they were I don't know if you know App Annie, but they were competing. In any case, we had like 5 different systems, and and it just was completely broken. And so it was a black box that we just eventually just ignored. And I was the one who was thinking about it at that time. So Absolutely. And then the thing is, like, that's still a problem, right? People talk a lot about that right now. I do podcasts interviewing folks all the time, and they're always talking about the same thing, right? And they haven't really figured that out. So the BI tools, they're just not made for this use case. We all know, as salespeople, being a former still recovering salesperson, like, if it's not integrated into our workflow, and it doesn't actually, like, move the needle quick and is easy, forget it. Like, especially if you have ADD like me, it's not gonna be leveraged properly. So I think that's really a huge issue. The other thing I wanted to say, just as I was listening, just wanted to point out, is when trying to identify our influencers or our champions, I mean, what better data, right? So even if it's not at the top of the funnel for like a PQL necessarily at that top, like Mofu and even Bofu, I mean, it's such a great indicator. And Kenny, I always talk about Kenny, I forgot his last name, or I can't pronounce it, but it's probably the more honest way statement. But he used to be the COO of Asana. And early on, I remember sitting down with him about, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, when they were only 2 years into the business, is when they eventually launched the sales effort. And what he told me was, we identify who the champion is. We know it's not always going to be, or perhaps very rarely going to be, the decision maker or the person signing the check. But we would do that by seeing who was inviting the most people into the Asana account, and then eventually look at them as, okay, well, they're going to be someone who's going to be championing us because they're getting everyone else on there, and then use that, sort of cross-referencing it against other data points. But that's a really interesting thing too, right? So it's not necessarily just tofu.
Really great points, George. And yeah, I mean, I have experienced a lot of these problems for a long time in my career, and definitely a sort of motivation for me to do what we're doing here at Correlated, is to help solve this stuff and make it easier, especially with the sort of this more self-service motion where product data is kind of essential for sales, and just not being given it in a way that I think is useful for being proactive and as opposed to reactive. Breezy, should we go to the next section? Because I do want to get into some of the examples. So basically what we're going to talk through here is some specific examples of like emails and tactics that we've actually used. And I'm going to preview, we're not going to show a demo or anything, but I mean, I'll tell you a little bit more about how we're going to help with integrations that we support in Outreach and SalesLoft. But
what cracks me up, Tim, is the fact that this is totally not. We weren't like, let's put this. I don't even work for Correlated, but it's like this is just like. It's like pitch after pitch, because I see the total value, and I do a lot of this very manually right now. So I love it.
Yeah.
No shame in here. We're not trying to do that. It's just coming out.
I want to make sure people aren't don't think they're signing up for because we're not doing that. But yeah, let's just talk about some of the email examples, and Ryan's going to go through some of the templates that he actually uses as well at Dooley, and so essentially, like, the big difference, I think, and where we see a lot of teams being successful in raising like conversion rates on reply, is going from like a less personalized, less timely email that's not like based on the right kind of trigger of what people are doing in your product, to reaching out to the right accounts at the right time, the right user at the right time with the right message. And so, a lot of what we see is an email that Breezy got is like, hey, try and personalize it because Breezy wrote a post on LinkedIn, and you raised funding. Okay, great. Everyone knows that because it was in the press, which is nice. And hey, I'm going to try and sell you something. So, it's a little personalized, but it's not really based on kind of any, real trigger or any kind of indication that Breezy might have given that, now would be a good time to reach out to her. And the message isn't really personalized beyond sort of very lightly personalized.
The other thing that's awkward
Okay.
there is that we're actually customers.
Oh,
So I got
I
this
didn't
email and
remember
we're customers of this.
I didn't remember that. That's a data problem right there.
Yeah.
And so the sort of better way to do it, I kind of put two examples in, one from HubSpot and the other from I believe it's Chart Mogul. They just reached out to me. So I'll talk about HubSpot first. We're HubSpot customers. I went into HubSpot to look at their sequences feature, and we don't have that capability. We didn't buy it. And they obviously have triggers set up when someone who's a HubSpot customer goes into one of these different features. They have a human being. It's probably automated, but it's personalized enough where it's basically like, hey, why don't you tell me more? I'm happy to tell you more about how to buy this sequences feature that you just checked out. So the trigger is super timely. It's personalized based on what I was doing in their product. The intent to potentially buy is there because I actually showed that intent by going into the product. A second approach, which is a little hard to read, so sorry for the small text, is from ChartMogul. We signed up to potentially use them for analytics on the billing side. And they noticed, the salesperson correctly noticed that I had connected our Stripe billing system into their products. I performed that integration. So basically they customized the email saying, hey, I saw you connected Stripe. And they sent the email right after I made that connection. So I think, by basically personalizing it to the fact that they saw what was in my tech stack and the timing of sending that email right when I had made that connection, they knew there was like intent based on that timing potentially. And they were able to get my attention knowing, like, telling me like what are some of the tools I'm already using based on that knowledge. And so doing those kind of like personalization and then doing it at the right time is super valuable in terms of getting those conversion rates up when you're doing kind of more of this cold outbound to product-led customers that might have already signed up for the self-serve product, or even might be customers already, they're already paying you, but they could be cross-sold or upsold to new things. So a couple of the strategies that work really well that I've observed. Ryan, I want to pass it to you. I think your slides are coming up for ones that you actually deploy, but maybe just really quickly before we dive into Ryan's, if there are any questions on this, let me know. And I am going to buy a timeshare, Adam. Just let me know where. George is down in Miami, so that's why he's wearing the tank top. If you can find a place, near him, then let's do it.
So before we directly dig in on this, I do want to say, that email that you got, was that from HubSpot?
I think which one? The sequences one was HubSpot.
Yeah. So this is where I want to bang the war drum. And this is, once again, back to that slippery slope of product-led growth. It's about a feature. Why do people use the sequence feature? Is it connect rates? Is it open rates? Is it net new bookings? What is it? Like, I don't, and it may have worked personalized just enough, but it's not hyper relevant. Yes, it's relevant that you looked at sequences, but I want to know why you were looking at sequences. And that's what we're going to try and do in these email examples. If you want to get your sales motion just a little bit deeper, your product should solve 2 to 3 at least business problems. It likely does. And what do I mean by business problem versus a technical problem? A technical problem is something your product solves. The business problem is what it actually does downstream and around the business. And I know this is Keenan's gap selling coursing through my veins when I worked from him. But it's like, why does that matter? Why does sequences matter to you, Tim? I want to go deep down. I want to peel the onion. And if you can start doing that in your outreach with the product usage data, now you got some real good response rates. So let's go next slide and dig in on a basic one. So this is an example that I wrote. I'll send it out every once in a while. I like it, and it gets good response rates so far. Said, hey, Amy, 7 of your reps just signed up with Dooley and immediately started updating next steps in their pipeline. Woot, woot. Which is probably not how I would say it in my head. Typically, this happens when you've made a push for better Salesforce updates or a major process change is taking them away from, selling. Would love to share how you can get better data, better roll-up data for forecasting while giving them more time to hit their number. Is this top of mind? What I actually knew about this account in the background, and this is from also speaking to reps, was that with this exact thing, the manager was constantly pinging the reps asking, I need next steps, I need next steps. The problem was that they were completely disconnected in their workflow. They'd take their notes, but they wouldn't have to go back in at the end of the week and get those next steps in. So sometimes they would forget it. And this was a high velocity sales team. So every second counted for them, and it actually impacted the amount of revenue they were able to close. So the reason why I did it this way is because I went into my data, I sifted through, I looked at all the metrics. 7 of their reps just signed up. It was a recent thing. I looked at where they spend the majority of their time within the pipeline view. And then I went to their LinkedIn and I found out they hired a bunch of SMB reps which tend to be higher volume. And they're just trying to make their lives easier so they can actually close more business and hit their number. And then at the end, I tried to marry it to what she actually cares about is I just want to see the damn data. Actually, Tim, maybe this is a good time to plug in, what you guys are thinking about doing with Correlated.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for
Because this takes me a lot of time to do.
thanks for selling for us. So I think Max up in the thread here brought up like outreach and sort of how can you kind of automate things a bit more there. And so we've already built out integrations for Correlated into outreach. So basically the way it works today is you can create these trigger events that we called signals. And so when someone has, let's say this exact example, 7 reps have signed up in Dooley, we can then say sort of the user that invited those 7, let's say they were invites, will get added to a cadence or sequence, sorry, in outreach. And so that's like step 1, being able to have that smart sort of add to outreach. So that takes maybe some of the work that you might have to do of like, who are these people that are worth reaching out to that have like hit this threshold and like digging around those dashboards. It takes that work completely out of your hands and automates a lot of that. So awesome. Yep. Step 1. Step 2 is now in creating sort of variable integration in outreach. So you can basically say within a correlated signal or some of the different characteristics here, which we call dimensions, say, hi, first name, I saw you invited like variable this amount of reps in the variable time frame, like last week, yesterday, whatever it might be. And so you can start to really customize the email and personalize it based on the timeliness, what they've done on the product, all that good stuff. We're going to make it really easy to set those variables in Outreach or SalesLoft so you can do that level of personalization. So that's a cool kind of feature I wanted to tease. It's definitely not ready yet. If my co-founders or hear me talking about this, they'd probably be a little upset about that. But it's definitely something we're excited about. We've been hearing a lot of interest in from folks, our customers and folks we're talking to.
So what that means for a rep like me is that instead of having to go actually find all this and then make the conclusion and then draft the emails, I'm going to have a template. It's going to pop this stuff in. And the only step I would have had to take is go into LinkedIn and find out that they're hiring a bunch of SMB reps. Now my email is complete. Let's actually go into the next slide.
Realities of scaling startups.
I think someone might be
Ross Rich chats with the next generation of startup founders about the ups and downs.
Mute Hector.
Customer.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So the next one, what I wanted to give an example that I use is things are going to change throughout them using the product. I have an example I could give on this call, but I think it would be inappropriate just due to the attendees. But not actually inappropriate, just more confidential. But here's something that I'll use in place. So quick update on your team. Because that initial email is really all we end up getting to talk about when we talk about product-led growth and using the data. So quick update on your team. John, your director of biz dev, created 14 battle cards for his team to be fed live during sales calls. In a crowded space with 6 new BDR hires, how do you get them ramped quickly and able to overcome objections like your top reps? Wanted to share how John is reducing ramp time and increasing net new bookings that could have slipped. Is this of interest? You can love or hate my email style. That's up to the rep. But ultimately, what I found here was that based on this new usage data, there's a different problem that may be worth solving. The director of biz dev came in, took it upon himself to go and dig into the data, and now he is digging into the product in a way that solves a different problem. Now those 6 new BDR hires, I'm actually thinking this is a ramp time issue and not just a quick pipeline update issue. Because I know the different problems, the different areas of the product solve, I'm able to bake that into the messaging. It could be hand over to customer success. It could be a couple different things. But the more you get ingrained with this, the better chance you have at writing a message that's going to get someone to actually respond, because it shows that you kind of know them, you kind of know what you're talking about, and this is not going to be a giant product pitch. So I think the wrong thing to do is you downloaded this or you're in our product. Here's what we do. We want to talk about our features. We want to talk about what our product does and who our customers are and all that jazz that decision makers don't really care much about. They care about their business. So I did want to get like feedback if anybody has an example of stuff that they've done like this, or what your guys' take on it is as well, Tim and Breezy.
Breezy, what do you think?
I am just adding some comments in the chat here. But no, I mean, I think when you think about like the different layers of being able to personalize things, especially with how crowded it's getting, with everyone's moving to email and digital and social and all these things, you want to stand out, you want to be relevant, you want to do personalization at scale. And what better way to do it than not just say like, hey, I saw you, downloaded this ebook or went to this website page, but to be able to actually say, you're either doing this inside of your product or your team is doing this inside of our product. And so when you know that information, then, and that's like, the proof is in the pudding in these emails that Ryan put together, it's like, you can actually add value, which is the goal. Like, we're not just trying to bug people and hammer people. We're trying to actually add value to their day, by being relevant and how we talk to them. So I think that's just a huge game changer here. And the more teams I talk to who are starting to move in this direction, I mean, even the data tells a good story in and of itself. Like, they're seeing 5x open conversion rates based off of emails that are written like this, rather than just, that are based off of, what you see on social. So by adding in this product usage data, it's like night and day. So I think it's a really cool opportunity. And I think it's awesome that we have this data available today. It's something that maybe was partially available in the past, but really hard to get to. And the fact that we have today, I think is really cool.
Yeah. 1000%. Tim?
I think I like this approach. I mean, you're absolutely right about the comment that you made before on the HubSpot email, where, simply pointing out that you used a feature, I don't think is sufficient in sales outreach. I think you have to point to, a solution sale, a problem, why might you be looking at that feature, and how can it really, add value and create value for your business. One of the techniques that I've seen deployed really well, and it obviously depends on the type of product you're selling. But if, let's say, your product helps you generate revenue, if you can, start to do a little like calculate it right, like Dooley or Correlated, you can start to do a little like math. Then basically you can add in as a variable sort of the estimated amount of revenue you can make, or time saved if you're an efficiency gain, or whatever it might be, into the emails. And if you can combine sort of product usage, saying, hey, I saw you invited 7 people, and oh, by the way, for like teams of 10 or so, or whatever it might be, that it seems like you have, we usually make you X amount of money, kind of combine those two elements, the like timeliness and then the personalization around product usage with like a value statement, can work really, really well. And so, I like to kind of combine those types of techniques, and we're seeing some of those techniques deployed really well by some of our customers. One last thing on the sort of PLG sort of outbound side that seems to work really well. We just talked to a major sort of infrastructure company yesterday that's a public company, and they have a big sort of SDR team that's designed to do kind of farming of their self-serve product. And what they told me was basically they have sort of this onboarding process that their customers go through, where their customers are basically looking at their solution alongside 2 or 3 others. They're doing like a POC, but it's self-serve POC. And so where sales needs to come in and like really win is when that's happening, and when they know that's happening, and there's like certain markers and sort of product usage that can help with that. And that's when like they're sort of making money or not, because they can lose those deals easily, but if they get them, then those customers are really sticky, and it's a huge win for the company. So I think in addition to like crafting the content to get the response, which is essential for sales, it's also being able to like figure out, when am I talking to someone at the right time? Are they in like buy mode or evaluation mode like right now? And can I make sure that if they are, I'm in front of them. So I think it's a combination of both those things.
And something, and this is kind of back to your point of the HubSpot thing. Like, if right now, if you're in a product-led growth org and your VP of sales isn't really doing this themselves, or whoever's in the head of sales, A great way to figure out what that business problem is what we call it. I call it the so what audit. Tell me what your product does. The quick story when people look at Dually, they're like, it saves you time. It's like, all right, so what? All right, well, that time would be dedicated towards revenue generating activities. So what? Well, we missed our quota last quarter by 15%. And I think that if we had more time spent on this, it could have prevented that. Okay, so what? Well, I'm actually going to get fired because I'm the VP of sales and I need to hit these goals. And we actually missed 3 quarters in a row. So what? And you go in deeper and deeper and deeper until you figure out what the actual business problem you really solve is. Don't take the face value of what the product led like pitch for what the menial like small pain you solve is. Go deep, keep on digging deeper. Um, Not the Sandler pain funnel. Because here's what I want to tell about Sandler. Sandler does not dig enough into the current state of where they are and separate that versus the future state of where they're actually looking to be. I like Sandler, but I think there's just a little. It was invented like 70 years ago, and PLG is fairly new enough where we need to go even deeper on that discovery. But you're right. The pain funnel is going to work for this purpose, which is keep going down, dig deeper, figure out why this actually matters. Yes, exactly the concept. Figure out why this matters. Now bake that into your outreach instead of your features where they've spent time in the product. Know how that product data relates to that problem, and then you're going to get way better results.
I want to comment on Max's question here because I think it's a good one. Have you ever gotten pushback on sharing data you see on the back end? It's interesting. You would think yes would be the answer, but I haven't really seen much pushback. I think, if you remember even just a few years ago when like Gong and Chorus were starting out, I remember when they were kind of early on and it was like, whoa, you're gonna like record my calls, and that seems like an invasion of privacy, and like that's never gonna work. And I think it's an opt-in, so people understand that it's happening and can say, hey, please turn it off if they want. I think with product data, you're obviously opting in through a term of service. Maybe you're not reading that, so it's not quite as similar to Gong. But what I've found at least is that people are appreciative that kind of what they're doing, and are taking the time to like pay attention to how they're using your product. And if you frame it in a way that's like helpful and constructive versus like trying to badger someone or like be creepy, which is possible, I think. But if you frame it as a way that's constructive and like adding value, I think people are appreciative of it. I think there's ways you can like sort of misuse that information, which you shouldn't do, but I haven't seen too much pushback on it.
Yeah, and even like we get that question a lot because Dually connects to Salesforce, but we don't actually view your Salesforce data. We view your usage data, which is really the only stuff that's I really care about. I don't want to see into your pipeline, your customers' stuff. Like that's not important to me. But that does leave some room to be desired of like if I knew exactly what you were filling in or not filling in your Salesforce fields, I might be able to get a little craftier with it. But yeah, we get pushback because everybody has to be sensitive, but I don't see big issues with it. So
I think for us at least, also we're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. We take sort of the security of customer data, very seriously, and so it's definitely something that we want to make sure our customers understand how we're handling it, and that we're taking that sort of utmost precaution with our customer data. I think Max, I'd like this next question here, and I don't want to ignore the making fun of Sandler training, but going to this question for Max, I think is a good one. Told internally that we aren't able to share specific data points in outreach. Has it been talked about in your companies? So I haven't seen that pushback yet. And obviously, as you just heard from like our roadmap, like we're actually getting requests from customers at some very large companies to like do just that. I think the way we do it at least is in this like format called signals. So it's our system's very flexible. So like you don't have to necessarily do the like 7 invites in the last day where it's like quite specific. You can like massage it a bit so that the variable might be, I've seen an increase over the last week, or I see you've been adding some teammates. Like I think there's going to be ways that we can allow you to soften the actual numbers a bit if you want, so that the variable's still there, but it's not necessarily related to specific, hard data points. And so that could be one way around it. I do think that's also, Max, a cultural thing at your company. Like I'd be interested in asking like why that policy exists, and what's the rationale behind it. And we haven't encountered it so much, but happy to talk more about it offline if you want.
Yeah, I would be curious. Do you sell to security or IT? That might be one that gets a little bit shyer.
Yeah, what's Max? What's the product? You're at Mural, right? So it's like, if I remember correctly, kind of like workflow. Like, is it like kind of like Asana or task management type software?
Close. It's a digital collaboration tool, so similar to like a virtual whiteboard.
Got it.
So we sell to like marketers, sell to very collaborative people, product marketers, engineers, and stuff like that. It's just been, talked about like in our outreach, like we can see all the, member details, how many stickies, how many murals they're creating, how many rooms, like how many people are signing up within the company. But we've been told like, you gotta be careful. Like we can't breach the sign up contract that they like officially signed on sharing the data. Like, hey, we can see that you did 38 stickies, or hey, we've seen that you created 2 murals, or hey, you haven't created a mural yet. You signed up 3 weeks ago. Why not? We had to like massage the conversations a lot and be vague with our outreach. So I've been trying to like learn how other companies are using it. And that's why I asked that question earlier about outreach and how you're using it. And I'm trying to change that idea internally right now.
I think, the way our integration works today, at least, is, you're not able to do the variables, but you're able to get the people who fit those signals that you want. Like, yeah, they created, like you could do a signal in Correlated saying, I want to see all users that have created more than 20 stickies in the last week. So like that's like a trivial signal that we could create. And in that case, like you can then have that hit like linked up to a sequence and outreach that, is a template that you build completely that doesn't have to mention the stickies at all if you don't want to. Or you could say something like, hey, I saw, you're using stickies, something, you can like massage it however you want. But we haven't seen a ton of pushback from customers about using that. So that's interesting. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I actually know, does Bridget Shea work at Mural?
Eventually.
All right, cool. I think she might run your customer success. I'll check it out. But,
We
okay.
used it. Like my thought is, it's like you maybe even go towards the users that have signed up. It's like, hey, I noticed you have a dispersed marketing team. People signed up in like 3 different countries. How are you guys collaborating with an international team in a way that's effective and not all living on like a Google Doc or something like that, where you just take whatever data you're allowed to use and then bridge that into the benefit of what Mural is actually going to do for them. But yeah, you might be in between a rock and a hard place if they don't let you use, yeah.
I think this was a battle that happened with even just with like marketing data as well. So it's like if someone visited a certain web page and you immediately reached out, like, I saw you were on this web page, and then everyone felt like it was a little bit creepy. But I think it's not about blocking being able to use that at all. What's that?
So email tracking is like that too. If I call people, I used to call into HR, and I was like, "Hey, Deborah, I noticed that you just opened my email like 14 times," and she's like, "That's creepy," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, good start."
So I think there's like there's the creepiness factor of it, but then there's also like, are you saying too much? So I think in the same way that we hit that battle when that data became more newly accessible, product usage data will be the same, but I think it's just about like how you use it. First of all, if it's a contract and what you're having your customers sign, that's a whole other thing that you gotta sort of sort through there. But I think the other side of it though is not to make it creepy, is to make it useful, right? So saying an exact number, if that feels like it's too much, all right, then broaden the language a bit to say increase, decrease, more users, or whatever the metric is. and then ending it with more of like the value prop on why that matters, not just saying like, oh, I saw, this exact thing happened. It's more about that thing matters because here's why. And I feel like if you're adding value, then you get less pushback from people on the other side of it.
And Max, are the people that tend to sign up for Mural off the bat, are those the decision makers and the people that end up buying it at the end of the day?
Not really. I mean, they're the frontline people utilizing the tool, so we'll have to go above them.
CMO. So I think this, I mean, that's the most with like product-led growth is like typically the end user is not going to be the person that actually ends up signing up unless you're completely self-service. If you're in there in between as a salesperson, it's likely that it's not the case and you got to go up at some point. But those might be really core users. They may be involved in the decision process. I think if you're taking that and going above, you're actually being informative as opposed to creepy or intrusive. It's one of those things where you're not like, hey, you just logged in and did this, and then it's like they're like, oh, that's weird. I was just doing that, but I didn't want you to know that. Where it's like the car salesperson that pops out of the bush. I actually did a video on that last week about limited car warranties, but that is a little bit better because these business leaders are trying to make good decisions and they're trying to trust their people that they'll find good solutions and bring them to that. You're just speeding it up. You're connecting the dots quicker. That's what the sales part on top of this motion is really all about. It's you're taking it, and instead of extending the time to value or extending the finding the business pain and really bringing it uphill, it's what we're here for.
Awesome. All right. With that, I think we're going to sign it off here. I'll send a follow-up with everybody's to everybody with the recording and all that good stuff. So Ryan, Tim, thanks for jumping on, and everybody else, thanks for the participation.
Take care,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.